Okay, Rev 953.6-7A. You remember that connector I took from my old headlight off the 690, and I added that to the harness that to provide the lights for these headlights, and I blocked off the end of this one yellow wire because it wasn't being used. Well, it turns out that is the yellow that's connected to the yellow in the harness that when you turn on the power it's switched. So instead of having this yellow wire running all the way back to the tail light, to tie it into here, I just yanked this whole yellow thing out and I've got it done. How about that? And I was testing the flashers out, and it turns out that part of my strategy to run the rear amber light through a single wire up front, use the chassis ground on the flasher, is not possible. You have to each one has to go in and out and return on the same module. You can't use the chassis ground at all. So consequently, I'm now going to use this SAE cable and run that up there with that connector. I'm going to solder in an SAE connector to these two guys, and that'll just kind of clean it up under there. Now I've got this connected with using the SAE connector. It stuffs in there kind of nice. And I had to take off my rack and everything to get this stuff, so getting pretty good at taking this bike apart, put it back together again. Okay, so I'm going to take that off and wrap it back up. Okay, now I'm doing this port. It's had this really massive 12 gauge wire on there. Which was really stiff, and so I'm reducing it down to 16 gauge so I can go to my panel where all the toggle switches are. I did find another one online. It's this guy, which I thought was perfect, but I could not find one cable, one USB charger that would plug into that thing, whereas this one did. And I think it'll fit in the tower just fine. Okay, I left just enough red and black there to troubleshoot it later on to see if, This particular connector I'm going to have wired directly to the battery, because I want to be able to plug in a cell phone, or I want to be able to do an air pump or run a trickle charger on it without the ignition on. That's the reason. I decided to go ahead and put it in this hole, which lines up with the hole on the other side for the USB. So I'll use this, well, maybe I should go up one more because then my drill won't be in the way. I don't see anything in the way. Okay, that's where we're going to put it. We're going to go high. Since I measured this at And I'll use this as a deburring tool. Next accessory is this USB port. I bought 2 of them, so I have a spare. It's got orange in there. No LED that shows you the power's on. That's just a waste of energy. I'm going to put a ring terminal on the end. And so what I've done is I've established a ground stud right here. And you notice I've got this nut there. So it digs through the anodizing of the plate. And when I tighten it down, that gives a nice positive ground here. The reason I put the stud over here is because I got the flasher, the air sensor all on this side, and so I'm already taking up this space, and that way I'm not taking up any more space on this side. Alright, I decided to move my USB port charger over to this side. So I'm expanding this hole using the step drill. There we go. And since it's on the bottom, it's easy to tighten the nut down. Alright, you'll see this switch right here. Wires aren't quite long enough to get to the panel without stretching a lot of things. One end is going to go to the relay. The other one's going to go to the switch over here. So I just added a couple extensions to it. It doesn't need to be color coded because it's just an inline switch. Okay, we're sitting there watching some flat track on TV, and I'm taking the strobe lights and I'm just extending these wires out. Right now I just soldered them on, and now I'll be putting some shrink wrap, and then I'll be wiring those up to the switches. Okay, I now have my lighting all done. See lots of all the switches that are in here. I've got them labeled. These are double pole, double throw switches in order to control my strobes. This switch is the power, or that's USB. This switch under here, that's the main power to the tower. This switch is not being used. These two switches control the strobes. This determines whether it's solid. This determines front or rear configurations. It's all I used 18 gauge wire. It could have gotten smaller. Some cases a 16 gauge, but the I2R losses will be less this way. It's all neatly taped together, so if one terminal gets loose, it's going to prevent it from flopping around. And I ended up taking the relay, or excuse me, the flasher that was here, and it's now, I moved the relay from up here down to this area in between the tachometer. See that there? I drilled a hole, and I used double-sided sticky tape for the flasher up against the toggle switches. So there's the screw that I added to put the relay on there. Put right there. This was a failed attempt at trying to mount the flasher using tie wraps or zip ties, and so all in all, I think I'm pretty pleased with it. It's really very tight, so you got to kind of stuff everything down in there. Make sure you're not putting too much stress on any one particular object. And now the goal is just to get this thing squished in there enough that these holes line up on the top. I still have to glue a nylon washer on there. The USB port that comes on the stock one is being held in here. I'm hoping Mike Schramm can maybe take my advice, slide the ball over here, kind of rotate it this way, and then put a rectangular section in the sheet metal right here so you can drop this USB port in it. I think that would be really sexy. And then all right, so let me turn it on just so you can see what's going on. So I've got this switch on the handlebar switch. First of all, I just turn on the regular lights. As you can see, when I turn this switch on, well, first of all, you have to activate the tower. Now, once that switch is on, I now have power to the USB charger here. But the SAE is going straight to the battery for charging, trickle charges. So with this on the way is, now I turn this switch on. With both these switches up, you'll see that I've got the two strobes on each side are on. Okay. All right. If I turn this down, it starts flashing in just the front. And that's so I don't annoy my buddies in the back. Right? If I flip this switch down, now you'll see I've got flat strobes on the rear. All four down is strobes all the way around. If I was to then put this on solid with the switch in the back for the all, the fronts are solid, but the rear is flashing. That could come in handy when you're driving at night and you're trying to pick your way around through the desert and you don't want anybody running up behind you too fast that may be on an ATV. So there's 4 states. Let's see. All front on, front strobe, rear strobe, front on, and all strobes. Okay. Now, just keep in mind too that notice I've got this way down here. Remember what I did over here? I added a little brake. So it flashes a little bit, kind of early warning. So I think I've accomplished what I was trying to set out to do for safety, other than put a giant train horn on here to warn people. So I think I like it. I'll lock this thing up, put my 3 screws down, and I think I'm done with the tower wiring for now. Okay, here's the schematic for what you just saw. It all starts out by starting at the battery, going through to the ground stud on the tower. There's a 10 amp fuse in line on the SE cable. Goes to switch 1, which is the switch on the panel on the left. That pole of switch goes to the SAE and goes to the ground stud. The line runs over to the relay, and the relay, as there's a headlight wire that's yellow, that turns on the relay going down to the ground stud. Pin 87 on the relay goes both to the USB port and goes to the handlebar switch right here. that provides power to switch 4, which is over here on the end. Right, switch 4, the flasher is wired into this pin here. So on this double pull, double throw, both these arrows are going to the current switch configuration. So that power goes through here. The plus of the flasher ends up going over to switch S3. When you turn on this switch, this is the configuration that these are the front LEDs, this is rear LED. You'll notice that these are jumpered over here, so, and right here, so that no matter which switch position you put in, the front LEDs are turned on. But when you flip it the other way, it includes the rear LED, which is right here. The rear LED is, the plus is going to this pin 4. It's getting its power through the flasher right here. The negative on this goes to one of the 2 negative wires on the flasher. I'll show you a picture of that. The ground on the front LED goes through this back to switch 4, and it works its way over to the one of the negative wires on the flasher. But when you, in order to turn off the rear LED, or you want to make them solid, then when you flip the switch off, the power now goes from on switch 4 with 12 volts all the way over to the front, and the ground gets switched over on the same switch for the front LEDs. So you have to provide the ground. Since normally when you use this flasher, you can't tie anything into ground, so I had to have a separate switch to be able to make this thing go on solid. And so that's how I did it. It's just study this a little bit more and on how he described it. So if you want to do it yourself, you can. Give me a text if you run into trouble on how I crimped it all up. There's just enough terminals on the switches to be able to provide all the connections. There's only one place that I had to run a splice, which is right here. So if I had to replace this light, I'd have to cut that splice, or if I had to replace the flasher, I'd have to cut that splice. Other places, the wires are kind of daisy chained, like these are sharing the same terminals, same terminal, 2 on one terminal there. Up on the relay, there's 2 on this terminal here, and on the switch, the power switch, there's 2 on that terminal there. Okay, I think that's it for now. And I'll now go back to some engine things I need to be doing. Thanks a lot for watching. Deacon, say hi. Deacon? No, Deacon.